The title of this story is My Golden Brother Made My Childhood Miserable While My Parents Always Took His Side. Now they're desperate for my help. For a little while, my plan actually worked. Staying out of Tyler's way gave me some peace, but it didn't last long. He wasn't the type to let me be happy for very long. Instead, he started finding new ways to get under my skin and make my life miserable. If I accidentally left one of my textbooks on the table, he'd grab a pen and cover my notes with childish, vulgar doodles. If I sat down to watch TV, he'd immediately grab the remote, switch the channel, and tell me to quit wasting time and do something productive. Anytime I called him out for it, he'd just laugh and say, "Relax, it's only a joke." Then one evening, he crossed a line I couldn't ignore. It was a Friday afternoon, and I'd just gotten home from school. I'd been working for 3 weeks on an essay that counted for 30% of my final grade. Before leaving that morning, I'd left my laptop charging on the dining room table. The second I walked through the front door, I saw Tyler sitting there with my computer open. He was scrolling through my essay like it was some funny comic book. "What we got here, nerd?" he asked with a grin while flipping through the pages. "Give it back," I said, doing everything I could to keep my voice calm. "Take it easy. I'm just reading it," he replied. But there was something about the look in his eyes that immediately made me nervous. Before I could reach him, he clicked a few buttons. My essay disappeared. Just like that. 3 full weeks of work vanished in a matter of seconds. I lunged toward the laptop, but he laughed and held it above my head like we were little kids playing keep away. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted, barely able to control my voice. "Relax," he said as he casually tossed the laptop back onto the table. "You've still got plenty of time to write it again. Maybe the next version will actually be better." I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch him. More than anything, I wanted to wipe that smug smile off his face. But I already knew how it would end. Tyler always escaped the consequences of everything he did. There was no reason to believe this time would be any different. I stormed upstairs, slammed my bedroom door, and stood there shaking with anger. Downstairs, I could hear my parents asking Tyler what had happened. His answer came without a hint of guilt. "He's just being dramatic." And, just like always, they believed him. When I explained that he'd intentionally deleted weeks of schoolwork, Mom simply sighed. "You need to stop letting him get to you," she said. "He's your brother. You should be able to handle a little teasing." Teasing. That's what she called destroying 3 weeks of work. That was the night I made up my mind. I wasn't going to wait until college to escape that house. I needed to leave as soon as I possibly could. The very next week, I started applying for part-time jobs and saving every dollar I earned. I didn't care where I ended up living. All I knew was that I needed to put as much distance between myself and Tyler as possible. But simply leaving wasn't enough anymore. I wanted him to face consequences, not some childish act of revenge done in the heat of the moment. I wanted something that would make him experience even a fraction of what he'd put me through all those years. I wanted him to know what it felt like to be powerless, to be humiliated, to feel completely alone. I didn't know exactly how I was going to make that happen yet, but I was certain of one thing. Tyler couldn't keep getting away with everything forever. And when his world finally collapsed, I wasn't going to be standing there helping him rebuild it. By the spring of 2016, living in that house had become unbearable. Tyler had crossed every boundary imaginable, and I was done trying to keep the peace. There was no point fighting him physically. He was bigger than me, and I'd lose every single time. But I could attack something else. I could start tearing down the perfect image my parents had built around him. It was finally time for him to face the consequences of his own actions. The funny thing was, Tyler never saw any of it coming. He floated through life relying on his charm and the blind loyalty of our parents. As far as he was concerned, nothing could touch him. But the truth was, the cracks in his golden boy reputation were already starting to show. All I had to do was expose them. Tyler had always been irresponsible, but lately he'd become even more reckless. He dropped out of community college after only 1 semester because he claimed it was too boring. Instead of doing something with his life, he spent almost every day drinking, playing video games, and living entirely off my parents. Every now and then, Mom and Dad complained that he had no direction. But the second Tyler flashed that familiar charming smile, they immediately forgave him and moved on like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I kept pushing myself. I'd found a part-time job at a local coffee shop and saved every paycheck I could. Every dollar brought me one step closer to getting out of that house for good. I also started taking school much more seriously. It wasn't only about getting better grades anymore. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't destined to become another version of the people I lived with. Apparently, seeing me make progress bothered Tyler. I think my determination reminded him of everything he wasn't doing with his own life. So instead of improving himself, he became even worse. He started helping himself to my money whenever I wasn't home. He'd search through my room, find whatever cash I'd hidden away, and pocket it. Whenever I confronted him, he'd casually shrug. "I'll pay you back." Of course, he never paid back a single cent. Then one afternoon I came home and realized my favorite jacket was gone. It wasn't just any jacket. My grandmother had given it to me before she passed away, and it meant more to me than anything else I owned. When I asked Tyler where it was, he just smiled. "Oh, that old jacket?" he said. "I sold it. Needed some money for beer." That was it. I'd finally reached my limit. I wasn't just upset anymore. I was absolutely furious. And for the first time, I knew exactly where to hit him. Tyler had a secret. As confident as he acted, he wasn't nearly as untouchable as everyone believed. For months, he'd been secretly stealing from our parents. He'd been using Dad's credit card to buy alcohol and video games without permission. I only discovered it by accident after finding a bank statement sitting on the kitchen counter. There were charges my parents couldn't account for. I kept quiet. I didn't want to accuse him too early and give him another chance to lie his way out of trouble. Instead, I started collecting evidence. Whenever I found receipts, I photographed them. I saved screenshots of his online purchases. I even recorded him bragging to his friends about living rent-free while spending the old man's money whenever he wanted. Once I had enough proof, I made my move. Late one night, after everyone had gone to bed, I quietly walked into my parents' bedroom. I placed a neatly organized folder on their nightstand. Inside were every receipt, screenshot, and recording I'd gathered over the previous several weeks. I didn't leave any explanation. I didn't have to. The evidence explained everything. The next morning, I woke up to shouting echoing through the house. "What the hell is this?" Dad roared. I cracked open my bedroom door and saw him standing there with the folder in his hands, his face bright red with anger. Mom sat on the couch crying. Tyler looked completely stunned, like he'd been caught completely off guard. "I can explain," Tyler began. Dad didn't even let him finish. "Explain what?" he yelled. "You've been stealing from us, Tyler. Thousands of dollars. Did you really think we'd never figure it out? I was going to pay it back," Tyler shouted, his voice beginning to crack. I needed it, okay? I've been under a lot of pressure." "Pressure?" Mom said through tears, staring at him in disbelief. "You don't even have a job, Tyler. You quit school," Mom said, staring at him. "So what pressure are you even talking about?" One excuse after another fell apart the more my parents questioned him. For the first time in my life, they weren't swallowing everything Tyler said. I stayed in my room while the shouting echoed through the house. As I listened, I couldn't stop a small smile from forming. It wasn't the punishment I dreamed about. My parents still couldn't bring themselves to throw him out of the house. But they finally did something. They cut him off financially. The free money disappeared. Dad canceled the credit card. No more endless handouts. Tyler was absolutely furious. But for once there wasn't anything he could do to change their minds. His perfect image had finally cracked. My parents had finally seen a glimpse of who he really was. Unfortunately, Tyler wasn't only angry with them. He blamed me. Somehow he knew I was the one who'd exposed him. He couldn't prove it. He didn't need to. From that day forward, he made it his personal mission to make my life as miserable as possible. Whenever I tried studying, he'd blast music late into the night. If I owned something I cared about, Sooner or later it would mysteriously end up broken. My headphones, my phone charger, even my alarm clock somehow became casualties of his little accidents. At school, he started spreading rumors about me. He told people I was a snitch. He called me a mommy's boy. Yeah, it stung. But deep down, it didn't really matter anymore. I'd already accomplished what I'd set out to do. While Tyler's life was beginning to fall apart, mine was finally moving forward. By the time the school year ended, I'd saved enough money to leave. I rented a small apartment with a couple of roommates. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was close enough to school and, more importantly, far away from Tyler and the toxic house I'd grown up in. When I told my parents I was moving out, Mom burst into tears. "You don't have to leave," she pleaded. "We can fix this." But my decision had already been made. "I need some distance," I told her. "This isn't healthy for any of us anymore." Tyler didn't try to stop me. He never said goodbye. He simply stood in the corner of the room glaring at me. His jaw was clenched so tightly it looked like he might break his own teeth. The hatred in his eyes was impossible to miss. I didn't care. If he wanted to hate me, that was his problem. For the first time in years, I was finally free. Nearly a year passed after I moved out before Tyler's life really started unraveling. At first, I only heard little pieces of what was happening. Sometimes a mutual acquaintance would mention something. Other times Mom would send me a text. As the stories piled up, one thing became obvious. Tyler's charm wasn't fooling people anymore. Reality was finally catching up with him. When I first moved into my apartment, I expected to feel instant relief. In many ways, I did. Nobody mocked me anymore. Nobody stole my money. I no longer felt invisible inside my own home. But another part of me kept waiting. I wanted to see whether Tyler would ever face real consequences for everything he'd done. At first, nothing seemed very different. He still lived with Mom and Dad. He was still freeloading off them while barely managing to keep a part-time job at a local hardware store. Every once in a while, Mom would text me. She'd tell me Tyler was really trying. She'd say he was finally figuring his life out. I ignored every one of those messages. I'd heard enough excuses to last a lifetime. Then one afternoon Dad called me. "Tyler got fired," he said quietly. He kept showing up late, and eventually they had enough. I kept my reaction polite. "Oh, that's unfortunate." That's all I said. Inside, though, I couldn't help smiling. Felt like justice. Another piece of the perfect image he'd spent years hiding behind had just crumbled. And things only kept getting worse. Over the following months, his drinking got completely out of control. Whatever money he managed to earn disappeared on alcohol and nights out with the same irresponsible friends. He'd stumble home in the middle of the night, waking everyone in the house. Mom and Dad were exhausted. Even then, they still refused to kick him out. "He just needs support," Mom told me during one phone call. "He's having a difficult time." Sounds like a difficult time he created for himself. I answered without trying to hide how I felt. Then came the moment that changed everything. Tyler got himself arrested. He and a couple of his buddies had spent the evening drinking. Instead of calling a cab, they decided to drive to another bar. Predictably, things went wrong. They ended up in a minor car accident. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured. But Tyler was arrested for driving under the influence. When I heard about it, I wasn't shocked. Honestly, I'd been expecting something like that for years. What did surprise me was the phone call from Mom later that night. "We need your help," she said, her voice trembling. "Tyler's in jail, and we don't have enough money to bail him out." I almost laughed. "You're seriously asking me to help Tyler?" "He's your brother?" she replied, laying the guilt on as thick as ever. "Family sticks together." The second I heard those words, my blood started boiling. Family sticks together. I'd heard that phrase my entire childhood. She'd repeated it every single time Tyler hurt me. Every time I was told to keep the peace. Every time I was expected to apologize for something that wasn't my fault. Every time she defended him instead of me. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said as calmly as I could. "But I don't have any interest in sticking together anymore." She tried to keep talking. I ended the call before she could. I wasn't about to let guilt drag me back into cleaning up another one of Tyler's disasters. Not ever again. A few days later, someone knocked on my apartment door. I happened to be home enjoying one of my rare days off. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. It was Tyler. He looked completely worn down. His hair was messy. His clothes were wrinkled. There was a desperate look in his eyes that almost made me feel sorry for him. Almost. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "Can I come in?" I folded my arms and stayed exactly where I was, blocking the doorway. "What do you want?" He let out a long sigh and rubbed his hand through his tangled hair. "Look, I messed up. I really need your help." Hearing those words should have felt satisfying. In a way, they did. But they weren't nearly enough to erase everything he'd put me through. "Help with what?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. "Be specific." He hesitated before looking down at the ground. "I need some money. Just enough to get back on my feet," he said. "I promise I'll pay you back." I couldn't help laughing. It was short, bitter, and harsh enough to make him flinch. "You seriously expect me to help you? After everything you've done to me?" "That was years ago," he rushed to say. "I was just a stupid kid. I didn't know any better." "That's complete bullshit," I shot back. "You knew exactly what you were doing every single time. And now you expect me to rescue you? Not happening." His expression tightened with frustration. "Come on," he said. "I'm your brother." I stepped closer. "Were you thinking about that when you stole my money? What about when you erased 3 weeks of my schoolwork? Or when you punched me in the face?" My voice kept getting louder with every question. "You don't get to hide behind the word family now, Tyler. You destroyed that relationship years ago." He opened his mouth, ready to argue again. I didn't give him the chance. I slammed the door shut right in his face. That was the last time I ever saw Tyler in person. A few days later, Mom called again. This time, she begged me to change my mind. I didn't back down. "If you want to keep rescuing him every time he destroys his own life, that's your decision," I told my mom. "But don't expect me to be the one cleaning up after him anymore." From what I eventually heard, my parents managed to get Tyler out of jail. As far as I know, they emptied a big chunk of their savings to cover his bail and legal expenses. Even though he got out, the damage was done. His arrest followed him everywhere. People looked at him differently. His reputation took a huge hit. Most of his friends disappeared the moment things got difficult, and he couldn't seem to keep a job for very long after that. While all of that was happening, my own life was finally coming together. I earned a promotion at work, started building a career I was genuinely proud of, and met an incredible woman who completely changed my outlook on life. For the first time, I actually felt like I was steering my own future instead of constantly reacting to someone else's chaos. I won't pretend Tyler's downfall became the center of my life. Didn't. But I can't deny there was a certain satisfaction in seeing him finally face consequences he'd managed to avoid for years. Closing the door in his face that day wasn't simply about refusing to lend him money. It meant something much bigger. For the first time, I had taken back control over my own life. For years, I'd been the family scapegoat. I was the one blamed, ignored, or expected to sacrifice everything so Tyler could avoid responsibility. Now the roles had changed. I wasn't the one drowning anymore. He was. After cutting him out completely, my life improved in ways I never thought possible. The constant tension disappeared. I no longer carried the weight of my family's dysfunction everywhere I went. Instead, I poured my energy into building something better. At work, people noticed how hard I worked. My manager eventually offered me a promotion that came with a raise and a lot more responsibility. I accepted without hesitation. More importantly, I proved I deserved it. Things were just as good outside of work. I'd started dating an amazing woman who never judged me for where I'd come from. Instead of dwelling on my past, she encouraged me to build a better future. A few months later, we moved in together. The little apartment I'd once rented simply to escape became a real home. It was filled with laughter, comfort, and the kind of peace I'd never experienced growing up. Tyler rarely entered my thoughts anymore. Every now and then I'd hear something through old acquaintances. Sometimes Mom would call. Almost every conversation followed the same pattern. She'd tell me how difficult things had become for Tyler. Then she'd quietly hope I'd feel guilty enough to help him again. "He's still your brother," she'd remind me. There was always disappointment mixed with desperation in her voice. My answer never changed. "He made his own choices," I'd say. "Now he has to live with them." I refused to let myself get pulled back into that cycle. I fought too hard to escape it. There was no way I was sacrificing the life I'd built for someone who had never shown me the smallest amount of compassion. While everything in my life continued moving forward, Tyler's situation kept getting worse. Losing his job had only been the beginning. After the DUI, even many of the friends he'd spent years partying with stopped answering his calls. His drinking spiraled further out of control. Without steady work, he began asking my parents for money almost constantly. Honestly, asking isn't even the right word. Most of the time, he simply demanded it. At first, Mom couldn't bring herself to refuse him. Her golden child was struggling, and she couldn't bear to watch it happen. Dad, as usual, followed whatever decision she made. Eventually, though, reality became impossible for even them to ignore. They realized Tyler wasn't trying to rebuild his life. He wasn't looking for help. He was looking for someone else to carry him. Later, I heard he'd even tried selling some of my parents' belongings to pay for more alcohol. That didn't surprise me at all. Tyler had always been good at taking from other people. Giving something back had never been part of his personality. The only real difference now was that he couldn't blame me anymore whenever things went wrong. The moment that felt like the final piece of karma came several years later. By then, my career was firmly established. I earned enough money to live comfortably, and my partner and I had even started talking seriously about buying a house together. Life finally felt stable, peaceful, happy. Most importantly, it was completely free from the constant toxicity I'd grown up with. Then one afternoon my phone rang. The number wasn't saved in my contacts. Against my better judgment, I answered anyway. "Hey!" The voice on the other end sounded tired and broken. Took me a moment before I recognized it. My stomach immediately tightened. "Tyler?" "Yeah," he mumbled quietly. I need your help." Part of me wanted to hang up immediately. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. "What kind of help?" For several seconds, all I heard was silence. When he finally spoke again, desperation filled every word. "I'm completely screwed. I lost my place. Mom and Dad won't let me move back in. I just need somewhere to stay for a little while. And maybe a little money until I can get back on my feet." I couldn't help laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was cold, bitter. "You seriously think I'm going to help you after everything you've done to me?" "I know I made mistakes," he rushed to say, "but we're brothers. You can't just leave me like this." "Oh, I absolutely can," I answered. There was no hiding the satisfaction in my voice. "You spent years making my life miserable. You humiliated me. You stole from me. You assaulted me. And now you expect me to rescue you? Not happening. Come on," he pleaded. "I'm not asking for much." "No," I cut him off. "You're not asking for anything, because my answer is no. You don't get to spend years treating someone like garbage, and then expect them to save you the moment your own life falls apart. You're going to have to figure this out yourself." Before he could say another word, I ended the call. Then I blocked the number. For the first time in a very long time, I felt completely free. That was the last conversation I ever had with Tyler. From everything I've heard since then, his life never really recovered. He bounces from one temporary place to another, sleeping on couches, picking up odd jobs, and ruining every relationship he manages to build. Eventually, even my parents stopped rescuing him. Not because they suddenly understood what they'd done. They simply had nothing left to give. As for me, I've built a life I genuinely love. It's filled with people who respect me, people who care about me, people who support me, Everything Tyler spent years trying to take away from me, I eventually found for myself. And maybe the most satisfying part of all is knowing he can only watch from a distance. He'll never truly be part of the life I built. Over the years, I realized something important. Real revenge isn't always loud. It doesn't always involve dramatic confrontations or elaborate plans. Sometimes the greatest victory is simply building a happy life despite everything someone tried to do to you. By choosing peace instead of bitterness. By choosing happiness instead of revenge. I took back every bit of power that Tyler, and in many ways my parents, had once held over me. To me, that's the sweetest kind of justice there is. It's been many years since I walked away from my family. I've never regretted making that choice. Leaving wasn't easy, but it was the only way I could save myself. I've also learned that moving forward doesn't mean pretending the past never happened. The scars are still there. They always will be. The difference is that they no longer control me. Instead, they remind me of everything I survived. If my experience has taught me anything, it's this. Family isn't defined by shared blood. Real family is built on love. It's built on respect. It's built on people who stand beside you instead of tearing you down. I didn't find that in the family I was born into. I found it in the family I chose to build for myself. So here's to creating a better life. Loving the people who truly love you back, and never allowing your past to decide your future.